Are Micro Four Thirds cameras outdated for photographers? Today we are going to find out. Lumix sent me over their GH6, which is a Micro Four Thirds camera, 2 lenses, and for 24 hours I'm going to be a Micro Four Thirds photographer. And you know how I do things. I don't like to test cameras in the normal way. Today we are testing it in a number of situations, but the first is probably the most difficult and personally my favorite: rainy night street photography. Alright, so that test blew my mind. Those photos are probably the best street photography photos I have made all year, and I was not expecting to be able to make them with, one, a camera that I wasn't super familiar with, and two, a camera with a sensor as small as this. So those photos speak for themselves. If you've never seen a camera review on this channel before, I let the results talk. I'm not much of a pixel peeper type person. I'm not someone who's going to break down the technical aspects of each image. Do the photos look good? Would I put them in a book? And the answer is yes. So let me go over the gear that Lumix sent me real quick so you know what we're using. The first lens is a 9mm f1.7. This is an 18mm equivalent on 35mm cameras. This is a great lens for handheld low light stuff. That wide angle allows you to drop your shutter speed pretty low. I would comfortably be able to shoot at speeds of like 150, 140th handheld with a lens this wide, and with all that light coming into the sensor at an aperture of 1.7, this is a great option for night photography, and it's one of the reasons I chose to use it during this test. Now, the second lens is a 15mm f1.7, which is a 30mm equivalent when you go to 35mm terms. That 1.7 aperture is once again awesome for low light photography. It's why I chose to use it for this test, and this is more of a staple type lens for anyone who does street photography or day-to-day photography. It's going to match the look of 35mm with that 30mm equivalent focal length that you get with it. And one great thing about a lens like this, as well as this wide angle, is the size of it. On Micro Four Thirds, these lenses are so small. I mean, for a 1.7 lens to be able to easily fit in your hoodie pocket like I was able to do during this test, that's a real game changer, because street photography can get a little bit weird when you're out with a giant kit. So I love the convenience of this. I love the fact that you were able to let all that light into the sensor. And another thing we had working to our advantage in this test is the sensor inside the GH6 is a smaller sensor. It's a 25 megapixel effective sensor, and when it comes to shooting in low light, smaller sensors like this work a lot better. There was not a lot of noise on these images. They looked crisp, and I'm not gonna lie, it really surprised me. I went into this test expecting the camera to perform, but not as well as it did. The second test of this camera, I wanted to be cityscapes. I wanted to go put the camera on a tripod and see what we could do, but on this particular night, the fog was so insane, I wasn't able to see any of the city buildings, so I decided to use the city as more of a moody backdrop and use my car as the subject for these handheld photos. And this was a great test to see how this camera performed in pretty much the ultimate low light situation. There was very little light present in this scene, and these are the results. Now, once again, those results should speak for themselves. I really don't have anything to say other than wow. I mean, the colors looked fantastic, sharp images. The first photo was made with the 9mm. I preferred that image in this test. I liked the wide open look. I thought it showed the city in a really cool way. And the second example photo was shot with the 15mm. I also liked this one. I liked how it was able to capture details on the car, even in that low light. And both images look clean. They're not too noisy, which once again was a huge surprise considering how little light there was present during this test. Now, for the third test, I put the camera on a tripod and I did some long exposure stuff. I thought this would be a good test to really see what this camera was capable of, as well as these lenses. With long exposure, you want to push your aperture to something more like f8, so you're going to get a nice, sharp, clean image throughout. And I wanted to see how these lenses, as well as the sensor, handled a lot of light coming into the lens. Were these images going to be muddy? Were they going to be clean? And the results just like everything else in this video, really surprised me. These shots look great. They're clean, they're sharp. These lenses handled all that light coming into the lens very well. There weren't any weird chromatic abrasions, there weren't any weird ghosting happening, just all around clean, perfect shots. I really enjoyed how malleable the raw files were on this camera. I was able to edit them quite a bit, and as you've seen in all the examples up until this point, the colors look amazing coming out of this camera. And also to mention the video side of this camera, which isn't really what we're talking about today, but the vlog footage that I was able to create with this camera, it being 10-bit internal, made for really easy color grading, and a lot of the B-roll that's been featured in this video I think looks fantastic. Now in my opinion, photos can look great on social media, they can look great on your computer, but the real test comes when you print those photos. So I decided to do some test prints of these long exposures and once again push the envelope a little bit. So I printed these images at 24 by 36 at a basic printer. I just sent them off to Walgreens. I didn't send them to my normal printing lab, and the results were really good. Obviously, when you're printing photos this big at a low quality printer, there is going to be a little bit of loss of resolution when you're right up close to the images, but that wasn't what I was concerned about. I wanted to see, could you actually print a large print of a file from this camera and be able to hang it on your wall or put it in a frame? And the answer is 100% yes. Now for the final test on this camera, I wanted to use a feature I was very excited about. It's the high resolution mode on the GH6. What high resolution mode allows you to do is with a twist of the dial, you can get a 100 megapixel photo out of this camera. The GH6 does this via computational photography. So the GH6 makes multiple photos at once and then stitches them together in camera and spits out a raw file that is this high resolution 100 megapixel image. This is great if you're someone who's looking to get more detail out of this camera, especially if you plan to print your images. I know you can't see it on camera, but these prints side by side, it's clear which one was printed with this high resolution mode and which one was printed using the 25 megapixel sensor. And also when you zoom in on these example images, it's clear which images were made in this high resolution mode because at a high crop, you maintain more detail. So after 24 hours of using the GH6 and being a Micro Four Thirds photographer, let's answer that question I proposed at the beginning of the video. Is this a camera that is still relevant for photography? The answer is in the results in this video, 100% yes. I cannot believe that I made this photo using this camera. This is one of my best images of the year, and it feels like me returning to the old glory days of this YouTube channel, and I'm grateful that this camera got me in a creative space to do that. And what's awesome is this is a camera that I only had for one day prior to creating this video, so clearly this is a camera that is easy for everyone to use. It's designed for the everyday consumer, but you can put it in the most extreme situations and get amazing results. So if there's something else you want to see me do with the GH6, I want to do a little bit more of a vlogging test with it in the future, and I want to try out the panoramic mode and test out like mimicking an X-Pan type look. That would be a really cool experiment to do. Let me know in the comments what you want to see, and if you want more information on the GH6, I'll link some information to that in the description down below because Lumix is sponsoring this video. I'm blown away by the results. Thank you for watching today's video, and let me know your favorite photo in the comments. It's pretty clear which one is my favorite, but let me know yours.